A side, B side, what side are you on?
Hey, Adam, welcome back to another episode of A Side, B Side podcast. Well, I guess I don't have to welcome you, Adam, because you're here every week, but you get what I'm saying.
I feel very welcomed, though. I mean, for a minute there, I was like, am I supposed to be here? But it's very clear that I'm supposed to be here, so I'm excited.
So we're doing something a little different because we are going to have a guest on the podcast. So we're actually, if anything seems dated, that's why, because it's out of date. We're recording quite a bit ahead, so.
Which is a new thing for Adam's life. I'm doing something ahead of time instead of last minute. So this is completely new territory for me.
So I had a chance to actually venture back into the theater for the first time in 15 months to see A Quiet Place 2, which was really good. Regal Theaters here. Now, one theater, you can reserve your seats. They still are doing social distancing and you still have to wear masks unless you're actively eating or drinking. And I think this theater was sold out at 16 people. So, they're still trying to do their part to keep everybody safe, which is really good. And to go back to the theater to see a movie, that was definitely a good pick.
Yeah, I've heard really good things. I have not seen the first one, so I feel like I need to watch that first, which I will do through my hands over my eyes because I don't do well with suspense.
Or as my daughter does, you cover your ears.
Oh yeah, that's a good point because it's the sound often that gets you.
That's what she said. It's the sound that gets you, so she covers her ears.
I do watch a lot of movies I got into this habit when I was, when I was younger and my kids were younger, and they'd go to sleep and I'd watch a movie, but I'd just put it on closed captioning only because I didn't want to wake them. So I have now for the last, probably 10, 15 years, often watch movies with very low volume and the subtitles on. And that definitely does help in the scary or jump moments because you don't get the sound along with it. Sometimes I miss stuff too, which is not good.
I will say John Krasinski did a very good job. And it's just funny to think of, Jim from The Office creating this horror movie sequel, which apparently the rumor is that it is going to be a trilogy.
No. Well, I mean, nobody thought that the guy from Bosom Buddies would go on and win 4 Best Actor awards. So actors have a way of sneaking out. Or that Mork from Mork and Mindy would go on to win Oscars. So sometimes those comedy guys can surprise you.
Or Peele from Key and Peele would go on to win an Oscar for a horror movie.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele.
And kind of revitalize an entire genre in a way.
Yeah. So it's really, really well done. And then the funny thing is, right after we leave the movie, we go to the store to get some groceries. And while we're in the store, they start having some kind of weird technical or electrical issues. So the lights are flickering and we're separated on separate sides of the store. And it's what is going on? This is not the time for this to be happening right after we just saw this horror movie.
Yeah. Nope. I'd have been out. I'd be like, kid, we can get to the exits.
There were so many things flashing through my mind. If I hear somebody scream, I'm out.
Does this store have sporting goods? Where are the sporting goods?
But I recommend it. It's a really good watch.
I still have not made it back into the theater. I've had several plans to do so, and something always comes up. So I'm very jealous, and I need to get my butt back in a theater seat very soon.
I wanted to tell you too. I finished Mayor of Easttown, which was really good.
I've heard amazing things. Everybody is talking about it, and it's very big on my Twitter feed. So now I'm worried that I've waited too long and it's going to be built up and it can never live up to the hype.
No, it's not. You still need to watch it.
Okay. I need to do that before it turns into The Wire or Sopranos or something, where Breaking Bad, where everyone tells me to watch it. And then I just get to the point where I can't watch it ever.
Yes. Go ahead and start it ASAP. I even told my mom, I was like, you need to. And she's like, oh, which is what I did. Everybody's like, you need to watch it. I'm like, and then I watched it. I'm like, why didn't I start this sooner?
So I've got access to HBO through something, but I don't have HBO Max. So it's weird. Like, I think I added HBO as an add-on to like Amazon Prime at one point or Hulu, and so I can see some HBO stuff, but I can't see everything. It's very strange.
I'm surprised with all the streaming services you have, you don't have that one.
And the fact that this podcast is just usually about Adam not knowing what he's paying for ever.
That and Angelina Jolie.
Yeah, those two things. Best Adam is bad at finances and Angelina Jolie podcast ever. Bit of a niche audience, though.
Oh man! So Loki's coming out next week.
Yeah, a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be I'm very excited.
I guess by the time this airs, it'll be out.
Yeah, because we're doing a time flip too, just like Loki is. We're doing this in the past, and then we're going to be in the future. So how very apropos.
Yes.
I never know if I use that word correctly, but it's a fun word to say. Apropos. Is it 3 words? It might be 3 words.
It's one word.
I think it's French.
I think it's 1 word, though. Okay. I think.
Either way, I don't know if I'm using it correctly ever. So I'm going to stop using it.
It's actually 1 word. And there's an S on the end of it.
Apropos?
Well, you don't pronounce it. It's silent.
Oh, silent S. Sneaky S. Ninja S. How apropos for me not to notice.
Anyway, all right. So this week, well, because we are going ahead in time. So this is actually episode number 48, which means you get to start.
And that means that we are, if I remember the number of weeks in a year correctly, only 4 away from an entire full year of the A-Side, B-Side podcast.
Yes.
Which I'm going to give us a round of applause. Who would have thought, huh? Not me. It's the Paul Rudd meme.
Yes. It's from Hot Ones, actually.
Yeah. That's another one where everybody told me I got to watch him. And now I feel like I've waited too long.
You've never watched any Hot Ones?
No, I know. I'm weird. I am so weird. When people tell me I got to watch something, it's like that this little part of my brain doesn't want to watch it. It makes no sense.
So then if we say, oh, don't watch this, then you're going to watch it?
Probably. I'm evidently I'm just a toddler all the time.
Well, don't watch Hot Ones. It's horrible.
You just wait. I'm going to watch it. Can't tell me what to do.
Especially the one with Paul Rudd or Idris Elba. Don't watch those ones because they're awful.
Fine. I'm going to watch those first. I mean, it is amazing how reverse psychology is probably the most powerful thing in the world. Like, if you tell somebody they can't have something, they want it, or they can't do it, they want to do it. It's like today. So in the Twin Cities here up in Minnesota, today, the state had already gotten rid of the mask mandate.
Mm-hmm.
And then yesterday, Minneapolis, the mayor came forward and said, it's gone immediately. And then today, the St. Paul mayor, in like the most Minnesota nice, passive aggressive way, was like, well, we can't very well do it if Minneapolis has gotten rid of the mask. It won't work. So I guess we'll have to do it too. And it was like, okay, thanks. So today, no masks. And it was very weird. I've been required to wear a mask at work for almost 13, 14 months, I think now.
Mm-hmm.
And today I missed it.
You missed wearing your mask?
Because I've worn it 30 to 40 hours a week for a year. And it's become so normal that I have forgot about it. Like today I went to adjust it and it wasn't even there, because adjusting it is just something I do out of habit now.
Yeah. Well, bless you. Ooh, bless you.
Excuse me. So yeah, I have been waiting and just when it's okay to not wear a mask, I can't wait. And then today it was like, go ahead, you don't have to wear it. And I'm like, and I had coworkers who were like, yeah, I'm still going to wear mine today just because it feels weird. And I was like, I get that. So I kept it in my back pocket the whole time. And there were several times where I was walking around and I'd be like, oh, shoot, I got to put my mask on. And then I'd go, oh, wait, I don't. So it was very, very strange. Reverse psychology. Tell me I have to wear it. I don't want to. Now you tell me I don't have to wear it, and I kind of miss wearing it. Makes no sense.
Well, they took away the mask mandate here a while ago. And so you don't. And stores, a lot of stores still require it if you are not vaccinated, which how do they know?
Right. Yeah. And that's where we're at too. But it's, we can't we're like, hey, sir, can I see your card, please?
Right.
Are you walking to the bathroom there without a mask? I understand you may have to pee, but I'm going to need to see some identification about your vaccination status before I let you pee.
Yeah. There's a lot of offices like my office, they have taken it away. I still wear mine because, yeah, you can tell me you're vaccinated, but I don't know and I can't ask you. So,
yeah. And wearing a mask in many parts of the world is not abnormal. Whether it was, just for regular flu symptoms or cold symptoms.
Yeah, there's countries that have mask season, and that's how they avoid flu epidemics and things.
I mean, Michael Jackson was way ahead of it on it. He was wearing a mask in the late 90s.
It's true.
We don't know why, but maybe he was just really ahead of the times.
He was ahead of the times. That's what I'm going to say. And
or he was a time traveler and forgot to take it off. So yeah, power of reverse psychology.
Non-suggestion.
You don't have to wear your mask anymore. Oh yeah, well I want to because I want to be safe. I wonder what would have happened if that had been the plan from the beginning. Somebody was like, hey, yeah, whatever you do, don't wear masks. Because that'll make everything worse. People will be like, oh, we're putting masks on.
Yeah, no.
It is weird to see. I literally have coworkers whose face I'd never seen before today.
Oh, wow.
Because I'd only see them in masks and they got hired in the last year. So that was very weird. Somebody you've been working with twice a week for 50 weeks. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's what the bottom half of your face looks like.
And people look so different when they have the mask on as opposed to when you actually see their face, you're like, that is not what I thought you were going to look like.
I had 3 regulars, people I've known for 10 plus years, ask me if I grew a beard over COVID. And I've had a beard for 5 years. I was like, guy, I wanted to be like, how bad was my beard before that no one noticed? But that's the thing is it's everybody looks so different without a mask that we forget what people look like.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, it is your time to go first.
It is. And I am totally prepared for this. Even though I wasn't prepared. So that's again a weird thing. I usually when I'm gonna be second, I'm not as nervous, but when I'm first, I'm super nervous. So I wasn't nervous today, but I'm still prepared. So that's nice. So I can go first. So again, reverse psychology, not telling me I was going first worked out great. So we talked a little bit about some of the stuff we've been watching this week. I didn't mention anything because I got distracted about being a toddler and not knowing what I've subscribed to. But I have been on a super movie binge over probably the last 2 weeks. And I go in waves where I'll just have movies on all the time. And in my apartment, I have 2 TVs set up that are often both on something just so I can be overly stimulated. And lately I've been putting on one of them action movies from the 90s, just ones that I've seen that I can kind of check in on. I don't have to watch every second, but I know they're going on. Well, not just the 90s, but early 2000s. I mean, I went through kind of restarted the MCU and watched the first couple Iron Man. And then I went into Amazon Prime because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Amazon Prime. I should see what's on there. And dove into the Mission Impossible movies. And then I don't know what it was about Mission Impossible. Well, for some reason, it made me think of James Bond. And I was like, you know what? I haven't really done like a Bond binge in a while. So I should search out some James Bond and put that on. I've seen almost all of them. I mean, for me, James Bond, my first experience with James Bond was the edited versions on like TNT and TBS that would run at like 8 o'clock at night, and I'd see it seemed like they were on every week. There was a James Bond movie, or almost every night there was a James Bond movie on, whether it was the Sean Connery ones or the Roger Moore. It was all the old stuff, and they must have just gotten a great deal on the rights, and they would just play them to death, like TNT and TBS and USA. All those channels used to just play movies nonstop before they had a lot of their original programming. So for me, James Bond was always Sean Connery, or in kind of the perfect timing of life, the Pierce Brosnan Bond came about when I was in middle school and high school, which for a stereotypical boy is about the perfect time to be exposed to James Bond, because it is basically written by a testosterone-filled little boy. So that was perfect. I love those movies. Pierce Brosnan had always been a hero of mine because my mom really loved the show Remington Steele in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching that and how much my mom liked Pierce Brosnan. And I remember that the only reason he didn't become Bond in the 80s is because of his contract with Remington Steele. So it was super exciting when his movies came out. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to find the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies. And I'm bouncing from all of the streaming systems that I have, and I could not find any of them. I finally found one, which is Die Another Day on Amazon Prime. And I was like, wow, okay, finally one. But then I was like, why is it so hard to find all of the Bond movies? And evidently, the Bond movies are notorious for bouncing around streaming services. They will be on Amazon Prime one day, and then the next month they are on Netflix. And 6 months down the line, they're only available to buy and rent. As of right now, any of the early Bonds with Connery or Labenzie or Roger Moore or even Timothy Dalton are all only available to rent from like YouTube or Amazon Prime. So there's actually a workaround for this, which I will link in our links this week. And that is the entire James Bond collection, all 24 movies on Blu-ray, is $80 right now on Amazon, which is cheaper than renting every single one of them. So I'm not saying I did that. I'm just saying it's an option. Yeah, it's coming on Monday. Mm-hmm. But it is an option if you're looking for them. So while I'm searching for all of the Bond movies on streaming, it opens up a long internet train of thought as I'm bouncing from site to site, finding different articles, searching for movies, and all of a sudden I find a Bond movie that I would say I'm a Bond fan, but certainly not a Bondophile. Like, I don't know everything about James Bond. I know a little bit about a lot. But I stumble upon a Bond movie, which is a Bond movie, but isn't a Bond movie. So did that make sense?
So is he just like featured in it?
It's a movie starring Sean Connery, and he plays James Bond, and it's based off of a story that was partially written by Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, but because of a convoluted series of lawsuits and rights arguments, is not officially a Bond movie. So the movie Never Say Never came out in 1983 and starred Sean Connery. It was directed by Irving Kershner, who had just a few years earlier directed Empire Strikes Back, who every Star Wars nerd will tell you that Empire Strikes Back is easily the best Star Wars movie of all of them. And he was kind of at the top of his career at that point. He ended up directing this movie. So it came out in 1983. It filmed in 1982, but it starts, the saga of Never Say Never Again, starts all the way back to the 1960s. to a film called the 1965 film Thunderball. So Thunderball, which was a Sean Connery version of James Bond, so we're going that far back, was written by Ian Fleming and two men named Jack Whittingham and Kevin McClory. Now, they all worked on a script for Thunderball, and then they didn't like it, and they changed some stuff, and they got rid of some of the writers. So Kevin McClory, who was one of the original writers of Thunderball, actually retained the rights to the novel that was written off of their original notes. So again, super convoluted. Three guys get together, they plan on writing a movie, decide to write a book instead. Some of the stuff that they wrote in their treatment for the movie goes into the book. The book rights get argued about in court, and they end up being owned by Kevin McClory instead of Ian Fleming or his estate. This goes through 20 some years of court battles between McClory and the studio and Fleming's estate, till finally they allow the rights to stay with McClory, so he gets to keep the book but not the Thunderball movie rights. And as part of the settlement, 10 years after Thunderball is made, the settlement allows him to make a movie using that script. Okay. So it took him a while. So this was the first time he could have done it was 1975. Couldn't find the right director. It bounced around. At that point, they never even thought about asking Connery to do it, because Connery had said he was done with Bond. He was not going to do anything with Bond ever ago. After Diamonds Are Forever, when he played Bond for the sixth time, in what everyone thought was his final time in 1971, he said he would never, ever again play the role of James Bond. Now in 1983, he ends up playing Bond again in a movie called Never Say Never Again. Instead of just calling it Thunderball, the movie title actually came from his wife, and I am looking for Sean Connery's wife, and I'm trying to find her name. What was her name? So how would you pronounce this name? Micheline.
Micheline?
Micheline? Okay. Because it looks like Michelin, but I didn't want to name her after the tire.
Most likely it's Micheline.
Micheline, okay. So 12 years after Sean Connery had said he would never play Bond again, when he had finished filming Diamonds Are Forever, he ends up in this movie called Never Say Never Again. The title actually came from Sean Connery's wife, Micheline, who said we should call it Never Say Never Again, referencing the vow that was very famous that he would never, ever play the role again. The producers loved it so much, they decided to name it that and put her in the credits, giving her the credit, the title, Never Say Never Again by Micheline Connery. So the movie Never Say Never Again, which the title was created by Micheline Connery, comes out in 1983. Even up until 2 to 3 months before the movie comes out, in the spring of 1983, the trustees of the Fleming Trust were trying to block the film. They were suing in High Court in London to get it stopped. It was thrown out, and Never Say Never Again was permitted to proceed and came out just a few months after a Roger Moore version of James Bond in the famous, ridiculously titled Octopussy. Yeah. Never Say Never Again is better simply for having not a horrible or awkward to say on radio or in public title. But it also does some things that it can do because it's not part of canon. So it doesn't have to pay attention to any of the Sean Connery Bonds. It can pick and choose what things it wants to pay attention to. And Never Say Never Again, according to all of the reviews that I have read and the details, I've not seen it yet, because it is not, I find out, in that 24 movie set. because it is not officially part of the Bond canon and didn't come from Ion Productions. So there are 25 Bond movies, and I have to find a DVD of this one somewhere. However, it focuses on a older James Bond. So at this point, Sean Connery, when filming the role, is 52 years old. And he has not played Bond for 12 years, 12, 13 years. He is definitely in different shape. He's older, he's wiser, he's not going to be the same loose cannon. And the movie places, actually deals with that. Instead of just pretending that he's, immortal and everything is fine, it deals a lot with his age and how he is getting older and how he must act differently and how he can't just do the same things he used to. It also, spoiler alert, ends with him deciding to retire. And it gives a nice story arc ending for the Sean Connery Bond as he goes through the entire life as a secret agent and finally gets to the point where he's like, you know what, I'm done. There are some interesting cast members of the Never Say Never cast. In fact, Rowan Atkinson, who would
Mr.
go
Bean.
on to Mr. Bean, who would go on to lampoon the role of James Bond in one of his later movies, has a supporting role. The main Bond femme fatale is played by a young Kim Basinger. One of the other femme fatales is played by Barbara Carrera, who we had mentioned before in, I think, episode 2 or 3 of the A-Side, B-Side podcast. We talked about an early 80s movie called Condor Man, where she played the femme fatale in that. Mm-hmm. That movie came out in 1981 and was sort of silly and over the top. She ends up playing basically the same role, a very similar role 2 years later in Never Say Never Again. It was also the first Bond movie to have some diversity in its cast in terms of the American agent. There's an American agent named Leiter, who is played by Bernie Casey, who was the first time it wasn't a white actor playing the American agent. So this happened way earlier than, I think it was the next time it happened at the official Bond canon was 2005. So it happens way earlier. Max von Sydow is in it as well as the villainous Blofeld, who I think now has been played most recently by Christoph Waltz, was the most recent actor to play Blofeld. And of course, it brings back Sean Connery as Bond. Kirshner, who was the director, this is probably his biggest movie after Empire Strikes Back. He really didn't go on to direct a ton more movies. After this, it was RoboCop 2. He did some TV directing. He did one of the pilots for the highly underrated Sequest DSV, which could be its own entire episode and probably should be down the road. But Never Say Never Again got some critical acclaim. They said it was a much more realistic portrayal of an aging Bond. It did well in the box office. Its box office was $160 million off of a budget of only $36 million. But some reviewers, including Roger Ebert, would say that you could tell that the movie couldn't really figure out if it wanted to be a blockbuster action movie or more of a character study and try to, give a little bit of closure to the character and Sean Connery. So it kind of found itself straddling that in-between line. Though it was a Bond movie and it was able to use the name James Bond and his backstory and some of the things from the original novel that McClory had been a part of, there were things that it could not use that are very common and kind of are expected in Bond movies. The opening credits, where you always end with the gun barrel and often the silhouette of the character was a no-go. The James Bond theme that everyone has heard, and I will not sing for you because of rights, and also no one wants that, could not be used. So at no point was the famous James Bond theme used. They at one point they filmed a pre-credit scene to try to give it a very similar setup as most of the Bond movies, but instead decided to run the credits as more of a normal opening and not have the opening scene that was traditional in Bond movies. It, as I said, it did fairly well, and it made, let's see, what, 160 million off of 36 million, over 5 times its budget. However, because of its unique circumstances, there was never going to be a sequel. There was never going to be a follow-up because they had the rights to this one story, and that was it. And it was Sean Connery's farewell to James Bond. I feel very silly that I have never seen it, and I consider myself a Bond fan. I feel even more silly that I didn't even know it existed. I've talked many times with friends and people that love Bond movies about On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which I thought was the most interesting of the Bonds because it had Labenzie, who only was Bond for one movie, and it had a very different tone, and it seemed to kind of set the stage for the later Daniel Craig style movies, but had no idea that this one even existed. That's probably because it was not produced by Eon Pictures, and so it was probably not on the catalog of movies that TNT could show me at 10 p.m. at night when I was supposed to be sleeping. So I have added it to my list. It is unfortunately not on its way in that Blu-ray set, which will be arriving on Monday. So I will have to find it. I may just have to bite the bullet because it is available on Amazon for watch now at $3.99, or I can buy it in HD for $13.99. Everything I've read says it's probably worth the $3.99 for me, and I will never ever have to search again for the Bond movies because I took advantage of the Amazon Blu-ray box set, which will now add to my box sets of movies I have tried to find on streaming and then just given up and bought the entire box set.
So you basically need another room for all your DVDs and VHSs.
Yeah, I have spent probably the last 5 years getting rid of DVDs and VHS. All the VHS tapes are currently in storage. So in a way, they already have their own room.
True.
So they will be, the DVDs I have whittled down to just my favorites. And then over the last year, especially, as I've been frustrated by not being able to find things on streaming, I've gone and purchased more and more. But as this point, I just buy the box set, so I know I've got all the movies instead of buying them individually. And the box sets usually come in a box and are a little bit more compact. So really, I'm still downsizing. It's just a different way. He tells himself.
Right. If you say so, Adam.
So that is next week's episode of the A-side that we're doing this week. And when you listen to it, it'll be this week's.
Or you could have just said this week's.
That's this week's. I just love that we're time traveling. I think it's so fitting for the week that Loki is opening up, and he'll be messing with the time stream, and so are we.
Yeah, but he's much cooler about it.
Well, I would say we're a close second.
All right, so this week for the B side, the story actually comes to a conclusion. It actually came to a conclusion last month, and I was actually going to do this previously, but then we got a submission via Adam, and I wanted to make sure we got that one covered. So this is the story of Michael Hernandez. Michael may be one of the youngest serial killers ever recorded. And it's funny that he's considered a serial killer, but you'll see why once we get into the story. So Michael was born February 2nd, 1990. He was only 15 years old at the time of becoming a serial killer.
Okay.
So apparently, Michael had a goal, a dream, an aspiration of becoming one of the most famous killers of all time. And while technically not a serial killer, like I said, we're going to get into that, but I think it's because he had a kill list prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So on February 3rd of 2003, now, did you catch the date?
February 3rd, 2003.
Do you remember what day I said he was born?
I did not remember the day. No, it was 1990.
February 2nd.
Oh, so almost 13 years to the day.
1990 to 2004.
Oh, 14 years a day. I'm bad at math.
So one day after his birthday, Michael, who happened to be a student in the gifted program at Southwood Middle School, would take actions that would forever change multiple lives. I said 15 earlier, I meant 14. Actually, we're going to backtrack one day to his birthday, February 2nd of 2004. In middle school, Michael's best friend was Jamie Goff. Well, he had two, Jamie, and he also had Andre Martin. And the three of them had a habit of meeting before school outside because the students weren't allowed in the school without supervision. I think most schools are like that because I can remember my school was like that. Or if you got there early, you had to like wait in the gymnasium or something. You know,
Yeah.
They didn't want you wandering the school without teachers there.
Yeah, who knew you might get into some learning or something? Can't have that.
Wow, the classrooms were closed.
I don't know. Who knows what they're going to get into?
Exactly. That's why they didn't want you walking around without supervision. So on February 2nd, the three young teens were able to sneak into the school. They sneak into the school and they go into the bathroom. Michael convinces Jamie, who's also a promising gifted student, a straight A student, and Andre to head to the bathroom, like I said, to hang out. Once they were there, he tried to lure the two into the handicap stall. Andre hesitated. Jamie did not. Jamie, believing this is my best friend, he's not going to lead me astray. He had no doubts, no qualms whatsoever. Andre was like, I don't know about this. Well, that hesitation was just long enough, and the school bell rang. So the three boys go off to school. Michael, described by several sources as a stickler for time, didn't want to be late. So the three depart the laboratory, head back to class, or head to class, I should say. Mm-hmm. The next morning, tradition was broken because Andre, and he cannot remember why, but for whatever reason, he forgot to meet his two buddies like he normally did. And that forgetfulness effectively saves his life. It's like the people that were in 9/11 and they're like, I normally take the train and I do this and I do that, but for that day I altered my schedule for whatever reason, or I stopped and I got a coffee, and their lives were saved.
Right.
They have no idea why they decided to alter their plans that day, but that slight alteration effectively saved their lives. And that is the case for Andre. So Michael and Jamie go into the bathroom and then they go back into the stall, this time uninterrupted by a bell. Michael gets to carry through on his horrific and fatal plan. Michael, who typically didn't wear a hat or jacket, sported both that tragic morning along with latex gloves. See, once the two were in the stall, the handicap stall, Michael locked the door. He faced Jamie away from him. He then drew his knife. It was a 4-inch gravity knife with a serrated blade. He took it out of his front right pocket. Jamie, realizing what's happening, begins to fight back. But Michael was quite a bit larger than the diminutive, sweet little Jamie. He covered his mouth. Jamie's struggles were evidenced in the cuts that he received on his right hand. The blade cut the pads of his index and middle finger. Michael sliced at Jamie and cut his throat several times before his final cut, slicing into Jamie's windpipe and jugular veins. In an effort to determine if he had completed his task and killed sweet Jamie, Michael poked the knife into Jamie's face and scalp before checking Jamie's eyes. They were motionless. He then proceeded to take the latex gloves off and flush them down the toilet before putting on more latex gloves. He washed the blood off of his face, his hands, and his jacket. As Michael was in the sink, well, let me backtrack. He put on more latex gloves and he positioned Jamie in a certain way in the stall. Then he goes to wash his hands and face and his jacket. As Michael's at the sink washing up, another student walks in. He sees Michael, and then in the mirror, in a reflection, he sees Jamie collapsed in the stall with blood all over. And the student asks Michael if he had seen the body, to which Michael replies, "Yeah, we should tell somebody." Real calm, real cool, real casual. Then he leaves the bathroom and he heads on to class as if nothing at all has happened. But a teacher notices blood on Michael. So when police are called, it doesn't take them long to figure out what's going on. They identify 14-year-old Jamie Goff as the victim, who had been stabbed over 40 times, along with having his throat slashed. Of course, they find the bloody jacket, the windbreaker that Michael had on, and Michael had latex gloves in his backpack. So, of course, they are able to connect Michael. Again, he was also seen calmly leaving the bathroom after the attack and after the body was discovered by another student. So Michael is arrested that evening, and he completely waived his Miranda rights, plainly confessing to the murder. According to his videotaped confession and journals that were used as evidence at his trial, Michael had methodically planned his murders. Yes, with an S. He had a list. In his confession, Michael told police how he had collected knives and how he also wanted to kill Andre by strangling him with a belt and then stabbing him to make sure he was dead. He said he planned to use a gravity knife with a retractable blade, a knife that had been given to him by his father, who absolutely had no idea of his plans. His journal detailed his plans. He had the date listed as February 2nd, again, his birthday. I guess that was his gift to himself. The two names listed, Jamie and Andre, along with a third name, Hernandez, Christina Elizabeth, his very own sister. In his journals, he also listed the materials that he would pack that day: hat, jacket, latex gloves, knife, and tape, and what he would specifically do with each item. The hat was to keep hair follicles from falling into the crime scene. The jacket would keep blood off his shirt and was easily removed and hidden. He threw it in his backpack. The gloves to prevent fingerprints and palm prints on the scene, and of course, the murder weapon. I am, as much as I love true crime, and I am in, I watch all the documentaries, I listen to all the podcasts. I don't consider myself naive, but to think that a 14-year-old was this methodical and detailed and planned, it's still, with all the stuff that I watch and listen to, it's still just like, are you kidding me?
And I mean, how many times in these stories it always feels like the first one happens and then things kind of snowball. This seems like planned and methodical and from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, that was his goal. His aspiration was to become a famous killer. So he also detailed in numbered instructions to himself how he should kill his targets and how to handle their bodies. Michael noted that he should put their bodies on the toilet and then pick up all of the items in his backpack and put all of the items in his backpack. He wrote, "Be quick and make sure to get any blood off. That was what he wrote to himself in his journal. One more instruction he wrote to himself: make sure they are dead. Make sure no one is in the bathroom. If so, kill them. This non-punctuated instruction to himself seems to be where Michael's plan derailed, thankfully. Shortly after Michael confessed, he was indicted on first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. The issue of his competency to stand trial was raised by his defense, so a competency hearing was ordered, the first of which was held in November of 2004. Court-appointed experts Dr. Vanessa Archer, a psychologist, and Dr. John Shaw, a psychiatrist, both testified that Michael did not suffer from any mental illness, such as paranoid schizophrenia, that impacted his competency. Therefore, they declared him competent to stand trial. Defense expert psychologist Dr. Barry Rosenfeld disagreed completely. He claimed that Michael presented symptoms that indicated that he was indeed suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. After both sides presented their findings to the court deemed that while Michael seemed to in fact be suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, he was completely mentally competent to stand trial. Well, as the trial got closer, his defense asked for a review of his competency. This time, psychologist Dr. Ralph Richardson, along with previous Dr. Vanessa Archer, again conducted an update assessment. Dr. Richardson noted that while Michael had an obsessive compulsive disorder, it did not impact his competency. Dr. Archer, again from the previous hearing, concurred on the obsessive compulsive disorder and added that Michael also had chronic depression and a dysthymic disorder, which is a mild but long-term form of depression. It's extremely common. More than 3 million cases per year are diagnosed. She also declared that he was competent enough to stand trial, that none of these issues impacted his competency. The court took these assessments and Dr. Rosenfeld's previous testimony. He didn't redo any testimony. He just resubmitted his same findings. And again, the court found that Michael was competent to stand trial. At trial, after the prosecution's case was presented, Michael's defense sought an acquittal on the attempted first-degree murder charge, stating that there was no overt act done toward the commission of the crime. That's the quote. No overt act done toward the commission of the crime. Which, how do you even say that? He lured the boys into the bathroom the previous day. If it wasn't for the fact that Andre himself hesitated, he balked, he would not be alive. That's attempted murder. Well, that too failed. That motion for acquittal was denied. His defense then presented evidence proving, quote unquote, proving that Michael was legally insane during the commission of the crimes. That too failed, and the jury rejected the insanity claim when they came back with a guilty verdict on both first-degree murder and attempted murder charges. Michael Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder and consecutive term of 30 years for the attempted first-degree murder charge. Now, before I get into what happens with Michael, I would like to go back to Andre for a second, because just recently, Andre completed police academy training and has become a sheriff's deputy in his hometown, partly because of this traumatic experience that happened to him.
Yeah, no doubt.
So in 2016, Michael's case went back to court. The original life sentence had to be reconsidered after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 2012 that juveniles could not automatically be sentenced to life without parole. Miami-Dade Circuit Court Judge John Schlesinger ruled that the sentence would be upheld. Michael would stay in prison for the remainder of his life. Well, I said when we first started that this story comes to a conclusion, or came to a conclusion last month. On May 12th, this past May, it was reported that now 31-year-old Michael Hernandez had died in prison. He'd been housed at Columbia Correctional Institution 50 miles west of Jacksonville in Lake City. Initially, it wasn't clear how he died, but an updated report states that it is suspected that he died from a drug overdose. Michael is seen on video collapsing. Foul play was never suspected. He was declared dead at a medical center near the prison. An autopsy was performed, but as of this recording, the results have not been released. And I'm sure they are not in any hurry because, well, we are still in the middle of a pandemic and he was sentenced to life in prison. They're just like, yeah, sure.
This happened.
It's happened.
Moving right along.
So was it an overdose, like an intentional overdose, an accidental overdose? Don't have those details. There were reports that Michael, had talked about taking his own life. But Michael Hernandez he died in prison on May 12th, this past May 12th of 2021.
He was in jail about as long as he was not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for his lifetime still.
Yeah. All his teens basically and into adulthood. But that is the tragic, horrific story of one of the youngest serial killers on record. But now you see why they call him a serial killer, even though he only, and I hate to say only, but he had one victim.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to mince. It feels like splitting hairs, but I mean, just because you have a plan doesn't mean, like he wanted to be a serial killer, but he didn't accomplish it, which is good.
Right.
I'm not saying it's bad, but I feel like you don't get to give it. We shouldn't give him the credit that he wants, because he clearly wanted it.
Well, I mean, if you look him up, he is considered. They call him a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
But even though technically he had one victim, he had multiple plans. And he even had a list of people after he turned 18. I don't know what the lapse or the gap in time was for, but after he killed Jamie and Andre, he had planned to kill his sister as well. But since there were no steps in that case, there weren't actually any steps taken towards that. But obviously with Andre and unfortunately Jamie, there were. But he also had a list of people that once he turned 18, he wanted to kill as well, which, like I said, I don't understand why he was going from like 14 to 18.
Right.
But
yeah. What was that? Well, I have to be an adult to kill these people.
Right. Yeah. So maybe he wanted to research more. I don't know, but there you have it.
Looking for logic in the brain of a 14-year-old killer probably isn't the best place to start.
True. Valid point. But there you have it. The story of Michael Hernandez, the Southwood Middle School killer.
And I mean, the silver, I don't know if it's silver lining, but at least it is a compelling story that Andre has, taken on. I'm sure this impacted the rest of his life, and now he's on the side of the law. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course he has to, I'm sure every year that becomes that's something that he has to remember. That's not an anniversary you want.
No.
And I said recently, but he became a police officer in 2017. Sorry.
Well, I mean that's recently. It's what 4 years.
4 years.
We're talking about stuff that happened 15 years ago. So 4 is more recent than 15.
Yeah. There you go. So that has been another episode of A-Side. That's the B-Side, of course. And so that means that's another episode of A-Side, B-Side podcast. If you would like, we would appreciate if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe. You can head on over to Apple and give us a rating and a review. Also, we are on YouTube. I know you love saying that one, Adam.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've always wanted to be on YouTube. So we're on YouTube as a video, like an audio. I just think it's cool.
You can also have closed captions on YouTube as well. So if you have a friend that is hard of hearing or deaf, but they love podcasts, go ahead and turn on the closed captions. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to get it on YouTube.
Yeah, or if you've got young kids and you don't want to wake them up and you want to watch the podcast, you just watch the podcast with the captions on, and then your young kids won't wake up.
Sure, absolutely. We're on all the streaming platforms. Of course, you can pick your favorite platform as well. You can also support the podcast. Head on over to buymeacoffee.com/A-side-B-side-pod on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, not Snapchat yet. Not really.
Yeah, that'd be a really short podcast. Hey, welcome to... We're back here with the...
We do have a Patreon as well. I keep forgetting to mention that one.
Yeah.
But we do have a Patreon as well. So again, A-side, B-side podcast.square.site is our website. We'll have all of our sources and photos on there. We have those for each and every episode. So you check that out. Again, A-side, B-side podcast.square.site. I should have had you try to say it again.
I know. I would have gotten so close, as I always do.
All right. So if you have a story that you would like for us to talk about, you can email us asidebsidepodcasts@gmail.com. Maybe you have a show that you want Adam to talk about, or a movie series that, not a lot of people give attention to, or a hometown crime of your very own that you want us to look into. Let us know.
Yeah. Our doors are always open, metaphorically.
Our emails are always open.
Yeah, that's much better. Because now I feel like I have to go double check my door.
Oh my goodness. All right. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Brooke.
A duck blind on Reelfoot Lake in northwestern Tennessee becomes the unlikely site of a double homicide. Then the suspect's body is discovered floating in the murky waters nearby to the scene of the crime.
Maya Miliete goes missing from Chula Vista after a fight with her husband, leading friends and family to believe he might be involved.
Tune in to Murder News, the Listen Edition, every Friday for the biggest true crime cases making headlines each week.
Subscribe to Murder News, the Listen Edition, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Murder News.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. From Adam and I at A-Side, B-Side Podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy. Thanks again from us here at A-Side, B-Side Podcast.